full and hopeful about things breaking in to our consciousness is that, as we talked about a few minutes ago, the world feels like it's in so much chaos because of, well, human politics, right? But experiencing a moment of glory, right, or a glory in, that's for everybody.
It is, and it's simple, and it is for everyone.
And it's like, well, maybe we can use those moments to come together, because there's no difference between, me hiking through the Tetons and watching the sunrise behind Grand Teton, which that was a moment. And someone else who may be, light years apart from me on whatever belief you might say, who experiences a black widow spider and just takes it somewhere and puts it down gently and watches that spider for a moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, why can't we come together over those fundamentals?
And I've been bitten by a black widow, and
you keep coming up with more and more amazing things.
Well, there's the other side, where I felt like I was hallucinating for 4 days. But I just think if we're present, we'll know what to do. And that's my mantra. If we're present, we will know what to do. And I think at a time when we have no time, living in Cambridge, it's hour by hour by hour. How are we to pay attention to anything except for our own stress? We can make the decision to slow down. We can make a decision to be present wherever we are. And that, I think, is what is deeper than hope, is that we look at each other in the eyes and we say, I see you.
Yeah.
And I am hurting with you as well. And you are hurting with me as well. And in that, we see our humanity.
I just wish that there were more ways to have those experiences together, right?
We did something in our little community 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. We had an elder come and do a sunrise ceremony. It was with the lunar eclipse, and in the desert, we're attuned to those things. We had a water table. And we had 2 vessels, one that was filled with water from the Colorado River, one that was empty, and invited our community with a shell to take water with an intention, a prayer, a vow renewed, and place it in the empty vessel. I thought that it would be a few people. It was every single person, and there were over 100. It took time. It took time. We ended up taking the water back down to the Colorado River. And I thought when we poured all of those vows, intentions, prayers, it would go right into the mainstream. The water, when we poured it in, it became like smoke. It swirled, it stayed, it deepened. Sediments were dropped. And then all of a sudden it looked like this galaxy spinning, and then 100 bubbles in the shape of stars went shooting down the main current. And it was like every single one of those bubbles was an intentional prayer, thought, vow. That is commonplace. Yeah. That can happen in any community. I think this is where I find my hope and what is deeper than hope, which is that commitment to engage.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to one piece of tape that I'd like to actually play for you, because like you say, it's not just experiencing these moments with the Glorians, or it's not just hope. It's sort of, how do we want to live also? So you're about to hear Barry Lopez, who's a friend of yours. You lost him in 2020. He wrote a great deal about hope and finding special moments in the natural world. So this is from a 1993 interview he did with author and poet Kevin Crossley Holland.
I think at the moment what I'm most focused on is hope. How is it that we become hopeful? I have said on several occasions that I'm a writer interested in participating in a literature of hope, in a creation of a literature of hope. And I don't mean writing stories that you close the book and say, oh, everything's going to work out. No, but...
What does it mean, man?
It means that when you close the book, you have a sense of your own worth and the possibility for you as a human being to lead a worthy life.
I'm sorry.
I haven't heard his voice in a long time. I loved Barry. All of us who knew him did and do. And his story, The Drought, about one man who was foolish enough to dance the dance of the long-legged bird, has stayed with me forever. And I just found this quote from him as, with no more strength than there is in a bundle of sticks, I tried to dance the dance of the long-legged bird who lived in the shallows. I danced it because I could think of nothing more beautiful. And with the turn of his page, we learn a person cannot be afraid of being foolish, for everything, every gesture is sacred. And I think it's these gestures, whether it's paying attention to an ant or finding a fish in a shallow and taking it to the center current as Barry's character does in The Drought. And it's the great blue heron that says, thank you. Someone had to be foolish enough to dance the dance of the long-legged bird to bring forth rain. I don't think that's sentimental. I think that is absolutely essential to what it means to be alive on this planet at this time of beauty and brokenness.
And we can do that every day on a daily basis?
Every day. Every day. Sunrise, sunset. This conversation that we're having now, Magna, is a Glorian.
I don't think I've received higher praise than that ever. And I take it with humility, Terry. By the way, folks, you should know that Terry Tempest Williams has given me a very, very precious gift. As she said, she's been based here in the Boston area for some time. And where are you going to next?
Home.
Back home. Well, she's given me this beautiful gift. It's a small sort of gumball-sized ball of salt from the Great Salt Lake. And I can't thank you enough. I will take care of it.
Thank you for your voice.
Well, Terry Tempest Williams, her new book is called The Glorians. Please do go to onpointradio.org and read an excerpt of it. I'm Magna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And City Space Productions, WBUR's creative studio for custom podcasts that tell a brand's story to ignite engagement, reach new audiences, or establish thought leadership. WBUR.org/creative studio.
This is 94.9 KUOW and KUOW.org. It's almost noon on this Friday the 13th and almost time for Week in Review. Here is host Bill Radke with a preview of today's show.
What? A state income tax in Washington? Assuming the governor signs it and the courts uphold it and the voters don't repeal it? Wow, we're going to discuss that and debate, I'm sure. Howard Schultz will be listening to the show as he drives away to Florida in the minivan. See, bye, Howard. We'll talk about the rest of the week's big news. We'll get into what made us smile by the end of the show, so I really would advise staying tuned.
In the town of Bellingham, a beautiful urban creek flows through the city to the sea. But 26 years ago, a devastating explosion changed everything. Young lives were lost, and the creek and the ecosystems around it were obliterated. On the next episode of The Wild, we tell the story of how Whatcom Creek found its way back to life. The Wild with Chris Morgan on KUOW, Fridays at 8 p.m. and Saturdays at 2 p.m.
Support for KUOW comes from Thalia's Umbrella, presenting Amir by Sam Holcroft. The audience is invited to the wedding of Layla and Joel. The wedding is a lie. The entertainment that follows is also a lie. Playing through March 14th at 12th Avenue Arts. Ticket info at thaliasumbrella.org.
And from Seattle Children's Heart Center, with heart care for kids from pre-birth through early adulthood, covering the full range of heart conditions. With 13 clinics in Washington, including the newest in Renton, Seattle Children's is working to bring pediatric heart care closer to home. More at seattlechildrens.org.
The synth-pop duo Hot and Freddie grew out of singer Michelle Buzz's obsession with 17th century fashion and the traveling circus. The music came a little later.
I remember the time I was like, I found pirate blouses and like, would you wear one?
And I was like, yeah, of course I'd wear a pirate blouse.
I'm Elsa Chang. We'll talk about Hot and Freddie's debut album, Big Disgrace, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
That story and more between 3 and 6 p.m. this afternoon, and news with Kim Malcolm on KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham, and wherever you go on the KUOW app. We're a self-sustaining service of the University of Washington. It's 12:01.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. As the U.S.-Israel war against Iran rages, more American troops have died. U.S. Central Command says 6 troops died when their military refueling plane crashed in western Iraq. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said this morning it happened in friendly airspace, but was not the result of hostile or friendly fire. U.S. CENTCOM says a second plane involved in the encounter landed safely. The latest fatalities bring to at least 11 the number of U.S. troops killed since the start of the war 2 weeks ago. NPR has confirmed that a Japan-based Marine unit is heading to the Middle East. A source not authorized to speak publicly says about 2,200 service members from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit based in Okinawa aboard the USS Tripoli will join an armada of ships taking part in the Iran war. No word on what role the Marines will play. The deployment was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. NPR's learned that the man who attacked a synagogue outside Detroit yesterday was a naturalized U.S. citizen who lost 2 brothers as well as a young niece and nephew in an Israeli strike in Mashkara, Lebanon last week, according to the town's mayor. In Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer addressed the public as the FBI investigates the synagogue attack as a targeted act of violence against the Jewish community.
We will call it out. We must lower the rhetoric in this state and in this country, especially at this moment where we have seen such a rise in anti-Semitism and more attacks on the Jewish community.
Authorities say the assailant, identified as 41-year-old Ayman Mohammed Ghazali, was killed by Temple Israel security after he drove into the synagogue in West Bloomfield Township and the vehicle caught fire. Cuba says it is in the middle of negotiations with the United States. NPR's Ada Peralta reports this comes amid a U.S. blockade of oil.
During an address on state television, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel admitted for the first time that the Cuban government was in direct negotiations with the U.S. government. Díaz-Canel said the talks were at the initial stages. He said Cuba was taking a peaceful approach toward finding solutions of, quote, bilateral differences. He did not give any details on the substance of the negotiations. Cuba hasn't received any oil for 3 months now. It means the island has experienced rolling blackouts, leaving hospitals and other public institutions on the brink of collapse. President Trump has said he expects the Cuban government to collapse or negotiate a transition like the one in Venezuela. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Maracaibo, Venezuela.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow is down 10 points. The S&P has fallen 23 points, and the Nasdaq is down 171 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Noelle Gasca in Seattle. Immigration agents made more than 2,300 arrests in Washington last year. Nearly half were in King County. That's according to a new report from UW Center for Human Rights. Director Angela Godoy says while arrests are not at the scale of places like Minnesota, enforcement has stepped up.
I hear a lot of conversation here in Washington about, we need to be ready if they do like what they're doing in Minnesota, if they bring it here. And in fact, I think this data shows they're already doing it here.
She says a lot of the arrests happen during traffic stops to people who have lived here a long time. Godoy says the amount of arrests in Washington state are reaching the same record highs set by the Obama administration. A large chunk of those previous removals were immigrants with criminal convictions and people who were illegally trying to cross the border. After King County, Yakima had the second most immigration arrests in the state, with about 400 people arrested. UW Center for Human Rights obtained these arrest numbers through a public records request. And Pierce County prosecutors are asking Sheriff Keith Swank to take down a social media post they say contradicts state and local laws. Swank's January post on X said the sheriff's office would not hire non-U.S. citizens. The Tacoma News Tribune says a memo it obtained through a public records request informs Swank that his statements don't reflect the law or local policies and could expose both him and the county to legal liability. State law allows green card holders and participants in Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, to serve as law enforcement officers. Swank told the News Tribune that regardless of what prosecutors say, quote, "I'm not taking it down." The post remains visible on Swank's X account, which has about 34,000 followers. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Bayer. Bayer is dedicated to delivering breakthroughs that save lives and feed the world using the scientific process. Learn more at sciencedelivers.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. A week happened. Lots of stuff took place. Maybe you followed it. Maybe you've been busy. Maybe you've got questions. We're going to work through it and hopefully help you understand. By we, I mean this week's panel. We've got the Seattle Times state politics reporter, Shauna Sowersby. Hi, Shauna.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You've been busy.
A little bit.
Let's talk about some state politics here in a moment. We've got the founder of Earth Finance, a former member of that state House and Senate, Reuven Carlyle. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
And we've got the founder and president of Gamoran Legal Consulting, Saul Gamoran. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Bill.
How about that March snow? Was it a snowstorm? Is every snowfall a storm, or was it just snow?
It didn't stick.
It didn't. Oh, it stuck where I was.
In Bellevue, it was sticking too this morning.
Well, you made it through. Let's just say it was a snowstorm and that you battled through it to be here. Thank you very much. We're on YouTube, so you can watch the show. Just search KUOW Public Radio, and we'll pop right up. And we sure are handsome. Let's talk about what happened 60 miles away in the snow. Well, it's just in Olympia. There was a state session, legislative session, that came to an end yesterday. And the big news, of course, Washington's first ever state income tax sits on the desk of Governor Ferguson, who says he will sign it into law. A state income tax passed by Democratic legislators. Reuven Carlyle, you used to be one of those Democratic legislators. As we were talking beforehand, the Anti-Tax Freedom Foundation put you on its big spender list like 13 years ago. So you, I assume, are thrilled by this new tax on incomes over $1 million.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I was, in the legislature for 14 years. You vote for a lot of budgets and a lot of spending and a lot of taxes during that time. But, this is a new era. This is a new approach. And on some level, I mean, for generations, we've had conversations, of course, about our tax structure. And what I learned during that time, what I learned as chair of the Finance Committee, and what I learned from best practices is that the most effective tax system is one that has low rates broadly applied with few exemptions. So low property, low sales, low corporate, and low income. I think what we're on the path toward doing here is moving toward California, which is high rates, narrowly applied with lots of exemptions. And that's really about volatility. And so I appreciate how much passion and energy and spirit has gone behind this in terms of the Democrats passing it. But I think that it's not really about fundamental tax reform and equity. It's really about a new source of revenue. And I worry a lot about being the home of Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, Boeing, Costco, T-Mobile, Expedia, the premier companies in the world. And I really worry that this narrowing of the tax base instead of broadening it is just a fundamental shift. And ultimately, it's the biggest change in generations. And I just think the voters should have had the opportunity to make this decision.
Okay, there's about 15 things to talk about right in that. Let's start with the fact that Shauna, Reuven Carlyle saying this was not enough of a tax reform that part of the selling point was going from a very regressive tax system. Well, now that we have this tax on rich people, we can get rid of some of those taxes that are more regressive. And he talked about a lot of other stuff. But I want to check in with you. You covered this session. Weren't there cuts? There were tax cuts as part of this income tax, right?
Yes, correct. There was the B&O tax that was cut for small businesses. I think Ferguson estimated, I don't know, maybe somebody can check me on that. I can't quite remember the amount of businesses he said that would cover, but would remove the state's really high B&O tax rate for them. And also as part of it, there was a repeal of some of the tax on services that were enacted last year as part of the $9 billion tax proposal, or tax package, I should say.
Yeah, taxes on temporary staffing and live performances. There were sales tax eliminations, right? Speaking of eliminations, diapers, for example, over-the-counter drugs, hygiene products. Reuven, the working families tax credit got expanded, so almost 500,000 more households eligible. So we're going to go to Saul here in a moment, but our listeners might be confused. Wasn't there horse trading here, and weren't there tax cuts to go along with the millionaire tax?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Senator Jamie Peterson, my dear friend, who navigated this, the architect of this, really felt strongly about that as well, and a lot of support for that. But ultimately, in my opinion, the reductions were transactional. They were they're shorter term. They're more modest in scope. To me, fundamental tax reform is, what does a 21st century tax system look like? And I think we're moving toward a narrow base instead of a broad base. And I think that's just a structural mistake. And it's not minimizing some of the benefits of the working families tax credit. But most of the benefits that were given as part of that horse trading are on the spending side. They're not really structurally associated with the tax system.
Saul Gamoran, I expect to dislike this income tax. Are you going to come through for me?
I am, actually,
okay.
Yes. This is a disaster. It's going to kill the entrepreneurial spirit of our community. I know so many people that are moving literally out of state.
Because of the income tax?
Because of the income tax, yes. Because of the income tax. It's going to reduce the tax base tremendously. It's going to have the opposite effect of what they're hoping for, number one. Number two, the Democrats defeated an amendment that would say it can't go lower than $1 million. They defeated that amendment. And why would they do that? Because they're going to tax the middle class. And at the end of the day, there's not going to be enough revenue from the top, and they're going to start taxing the middle class and lower this.
Let me check in with my other panelists. Does everyone agree that this tax is going to be, the future legislators are not going to be bound by the fact that this is a $1 million income by household tax? They will lower that threshold.
I will say that there was never really a satisfactory answer when, pressing some of the Dem leadership about it, whether or not this would, eventually kind of lower the threshold. It's always, we don't know what future legislatures are going to do.
Sure, how could we know? Okay, but does anyone have any doubt that this will not just be a millionaire's tax at some point?
I think it's highly probable that it will be lowered eventually.
Okay. And by the way, some people think I know progressives who think, it should be lower. Yeah. Everybody should pay an income tax.
Bill, I'm a prophet, and I can tell you they're gonna lower the threshold, just like they have in every other state.
Yeah.
The second thing they did that's really disappointing is this fake necessity clause in this case, which makes it impossible for the voters who have voted this down 10 times to have a say.
Well, not impossible. This is maybe you can want to.
Well, unless the court overturns it.
But there's a referendum, a voter referendum, which is something that happens before the tax even takes effect. The voters have a chance to say, no, you don't. And it's a lower bar. You need like half the number of signatures compared to a voter initiative to repeal the tax, which they could always do and might do. Right? Do I have that right, Shauna?
Yes.
Yeah. But I am interested in the fact that they put in a necessity clause to say that there won't be this simpler, easier voter referendum. What is so necessary about a tax increase? Does that seem like seem shady to anybody besides Saul? Yes.
Just on the shady category, they put it in specifically to avoid that kind of referendum. That's the reason they put it in, not because there's an actual necessity. We've had necessities apply to different things, not this.
Yeah, that's actually right. I mean, the magic of this at the ballot is the question of the effect statement. So there's a sentence in there that says the effect of this initiative would be. So the way the language will be crafted, if it makes it to the ballot, is to sort of have a double negative. It says, do you want to repeal this millionaire's tax?
Right. So if you like the tax, you got to vote no, which is always a
would
weird...
have the effect of slashing and cutting funding for education, housing, healthcare, foster kids, etc. So it lists out, the emphasis is on the effect of those cuts. So that's how the language will be constructed. And, you can understand, and that's what supermajorities do, right? They get to navigate the complexity of what the appeal process by the voters could be, and that's whether that's a red state or a blue state. Both sides, know
it's strategic to help keep it right where it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, since two of you are overall down on this income tax, and Shauna, you're the politics reporter at the Seattle Times and are not going to give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, let me represent the pro-income tax folks who say that, the Costcos of the world, the companies that you mentioned, they might be here because the business taxes are low, or because their rich executives can live here and not have to pay income taxes. But they're not here because they care about the progressivity of the tax system. That we have this tax as it is now, might change, they might lower the threshold, but as it is now, it's going to affect a tiny slice of people. If your household makes $1 million in a year, you pay nothing from this income tax. If your household makes $1.1 million, you pay $10,000, leaving you with $1.09 million. That this is, and that there's no magic rule that says state spending should not increase. In fact, state spending has increased, would you say, like doubled in the last decade, Saul?
Exactly.
And what have voters done? They have returned Democrats over and over and over again. So aren't voters saying, and doesn't this so far, this tax poll pretty well, aren't voters saying tax the rich?
Well, Bill, I think we have to recognize that the disparity between the haves and the have-nots has gotten horrible. It's gotten way too big. It's squeezing out the middle class. And the idea of soaking the rich has become a populist and popular idea. And that's where we are right now. But as a factor of simply tax policy, this is not going to work.
Yeah, I think you do have a unique moment where this global populism plays out on the left and it plays out on the right. We are seeing this fierce reaction to President Trump and the brand identity of the Republicans. But on the left, in the Democratic environment, you do have this sort of ideological concentration. It is, as Saul said, it is understandable. We're living in a time of enormous wealth concentration. So it's not just about the mechanics of this particular millionaire's tax. It's just that in the last 4 or so years, the taxation system has fundamentally been altered. And in doing so, I think we just have to have the humility to acknowledge that what has made us unique as a state and why we have a strong GDP is that we have attracted entrepreneurs. We have. And some of those premier companies and the entrepreneurs and the venture capital and inventing cloud and all of these unique investment areas may not continue. We don't have a constitutional right to a healthy economy. We don't have a guaranteed. What would the state of Iowa and other places do to compete, to have what we have? And it isn't just about tax, as you said. It's about quality of life and workforce and outdoors and nature. And we want quality of life. The real question is, are we set up for this next generation of the kind of economy that we've grown used to?
Well, California and Massachusetts ain't hellholes, right? With their income taxes and all. Shauna, you've been Olympia watching for. You must be exhausted. What do you have to say about how this tax has come together to the point where it's on the governor's desk?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I, really kind of want to point out that I thought was really interesting was, when this thing was presented, it had, a set amount or a set percentage for the public defense system in Washington, which is failing. It's failing everywhere. We know that. We know there's a lot of issues with it. And
just for those listeners who don't know, what's the problem with our public defense system?
Not enough money, not enough attorneys to represent defendants, just kind of a combination of a lot of different issues surrounding that. And so, initially the bill had a percentage, I think it was 5%, then they raised it to 7% for public defense services, and that was eventually stripped entirely out of the bill, and now there is no definitive way that they're kind of funding this failing public defense system. Even though that was something that I know a lot of them said that they wanted to tackle this year. And
a lot of legislators said they wanted to tackle it?
Yeah.
Last I checked, indigent people who need public defenders do not have a strong lobby.
No, they don't have the ear of the powerful legislators.
Exactly.
How about, speaking of powerful, it was much noted upon the coincidence, the timing involved here. Did Howard Schultz announce that he's moving to Miami, to a no income tax state of Florida, because of this new Washington state income tax?
There is no doubt. The timing of his announcement was right after it passed. So there's no doubt that he was sending a message, and he's not the only one.
He said in his little statement that he wants to move to Miami because it's sunny there. I don't know if you heard, it's sunny and warm, and to be closer to his grandchildren. The closest he got to saying anything about the tax environment was when he said, Howard Schultz said, quote, "It is our hope that Washington will remain a place for business and entrepreneurship to thrive, creating essential opportunity for those in Seattle and the surrounding areas." I think he's advocating for the millionaire's tax because all these Republicans are saying, oh, the millionaires and billionaires are going to leave if this tax passes and survives the courts and survives the repeal. Howard Schultz is going to go. He's saying, no, I'm already gone. I'm leaving no matter whether it passes or not. So I'm taking myself out as an obstacle. It was the most forceful pro-tax thing he could have done. True or false?
Bill, I think to follow what Reuven had said, it's not just about wealthy people leaving. It's about entrepreneurs not starting companies here anymore. That's where we're going to get hit in the next 5-10 years. That's where we're going to see the true effects.
And explain that a little. Is that a economic diversity problem? Because a lot of people, when they hear, Jeff Bezos decided to start Amazon here. And it's been great for Jeff Bezos and lots of people who've made lots of money, and a lot of people who make money when other people make money. It's a lot of money been made, and it's great, except for me, person who I'm pretending to be. What I've noticed is that I can no longer afford to live here and go out and have a slice of pizza, et cetera. So aren't there just always, there are trade-offs? It's not a matter of that something's good or bad, but there's always trade-offs involved. And so if you think that this income tax will be because childcare subsidies will happen again, or that the public defense system that Shauna just described will be shored up, then you just see this as, someone's not going to like it and someone's going to like it.
Bill, I would respectfully disagree about the trade-offs. And the reason being is, there are people in this community that wish Amazon just wasn't here. Amazon has done a tremendous amount for our tax base here. Yes, there's problems in affordability in these things, but
agreed.
But the idea of saying that it's a trade-off, no, having these businesses here, the ones that Reuven listed, these are all pluses for our economy, pluses for poor people, middle class, wealthy people. And I just don't see that the trade-off is that maybe we'd be better off without them.
I haven't even mentioned the people who think that Seattle is ruined and congested and ugly and all kinds of stuff. So, but who else wants to comment about Howard Schultz or any other income tax before we take a pause?
I'm a little income tax talked out.
Okay, fair.
I've been talking about it a lot.
Ultimately, I think one of the nuances that we have to hopefully maintain in public service is a sense of curiosity. And I think that some of the proponents who have completely dismissed the idea that there could be a change in how entrepreneurs view this state as a home are relatively dismissive of it. They're not going to leave. And sort of blanket statements like that. The wealthy are not going to leave, or entrepreneurs are going to still start.
I've heard many
companies.
studies cited on behalf of that. Of course, they're going to leave.
Right.
It's common sense. And no, actually, it turns out they don't really leave as much as you think they would leave.
Exactly. So I think that there is an important role for curiosity in exploring how this plays out, because there isn't a single answer, of course. And as you said, there's a very legitimate argument of frustration around affordability and quality of life and how people can afford or not afford the basics. So it's an understandable moment we're living in. The question is, I think, ultimately, as I said, what kind of system do we want 5-10 years? What kind of generational approach to our tax system do we want? And I just hope that we maintain ourselves as a place where people want to start businesses and industry, and I'm really concerned about it.
But can't that tax structure change in the next legislative session and the next one? This tax could be repealed if the people of Washington don't like it. We're rolling back the capital or the estate tax increase. Taxes sometimes do get rolled back. I know it's rare, but this democratic republic could not like the experiment with this income tax and change it, right? We'll go to vote. There will be a voter initiative to repeal it.
Well, someone's got to spend millions of dollars to put it on the ballot.
Well, there's
Brian
one
Hayward,
other
whoever.
there's one other
happen.
issue about it, which is it's unconstitutional. Now, in the fall, there's going to be 4 new justices on our state Supreme Court, so it might not be hyper-partisan anymore, and it might be kicked off by the courts.
That's right. Hyper-partisan, by the way, is what you call a decision when you don't like the decision.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, then it's hyper-partisan. But you're right. This will go to the state Supreme Court. Does anyone want to, are you just too exhausted, Shauna, to talk about the question of whether income is property? Because I'm fascinated. I just got a cup of coffee in me.
Yeah, Jim wrote a lot about that. He did a pretty good article leading up to the vote, I think.
This is your Seattle Times colleague, Jim Bruner.
Sorry. Yes, Jim Bruner did a really good article about that and kind of this decision, that's made, almost 100 years ago about whether or not it is, which it was ruled as, being property. So
yes, and 100 years ago, Saul Gamoran said, this is not a hyper-partisan decision.
Exactly.
He was very happy.
I said it was solid.
Solid and defensible. Okay, why don't we take a break? Maybe it occurs to me, maybe Howard Schultz doesn't want to deal with all, because the supersonics might come back. Isn't that announcement coming this year?
They're
probably.
coming.
Okay, so imagine you're Howard Schultz, and every day reporters like Shauna Sowersby and others and me are going to be asking you about your decision to sell the supersonics that have finally got clawed back. He doesn't want any part of that, and he doesn't have to deal with it in Florida.
Or maybe what he said is true, and he wants son and his grandchildren.
Did you just take someone at their word?
Maybe.
The civility that happens on Week in Review.
See?
that's why I come
Week
back.
in Review. That's why
respect.
That's why you have me.
Okay. Let's take a little break, and you'll find out more about why we have these 3 panelists. They know stuff, and more news happened this week, and I want to catch you up on it. We'll be right back on Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from the Lasher Law Firm. Lasher has been providing tailored legal services and assisting individuals and privately held companies for over 50 years. More information is available at lasher.com.
Hey, I'm Katie Campbell, host of the KUOW Book Club. Looking for great reads by local authors? Join me for our Book Talks live event series with the Seattle Public Library. From February through May, we'll gather at the Central Library in downtown Seattle to hear directly from the authors themselves. It's free, it's fun, and we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Get all the details at kuow.org/events.
KUOW live events, sponsored by Fenny Ridge Painting and Microsoft.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. I wish you could hear what we talk about even when the microphones are off. I'm always learning something. We'll talk about that some other time, Reuven, about how much the legislature has changed. But for now, we've got this week to deal with. My name is Bill Radke. I have gathered together Seattle Times state politics reporter Shauna Sowersby, Gamoran Legal Consulting's Saul Gamoran, and Earth Finance founder, former state legislator Reuven Carlyle. Let's continue with what happened this week. Here's something else the legislature did. Okay, law enforcement is such a unique job. You have the power to use violence, for God's sake, to enforce the government's laws. You could argue that a sheriff or a police chief must be extra qualified, must be seen as civil and fair-minded. On the other hand, cops and cop leaders have free speech rights, and you could argue it's up to the voters to decide whether they're qualified and fair-minded enough. I'm talking about this state legislative bill that passed, one thing it does is set eligibility requirements for elected sheriffs and police chiefs. And here is a sheriff in Pierce County, Keith Swank, who just went off on this idea.
I don't recognize your authority to impose these controls over me. And when you try to remove me from office, thousands of Pierce County residents will surround the county city building in downtown Tacoma and will not allow that to happen. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I and they are prepared. Are you prepared?
Wow. So he's opposing a law he says would muzzle him and be an excuse to remove an elected sheriff from office. And in doing so, he gave a great example of why some people would like him to be muzzled. So who wants to start about that? Did I cover the law basically, Shauna? Is there more you want to say about it?
No, not particularly.
You got to be 25 years old
Right.
to be you have to have at least 5 years experience in law enforcement, no misconduct findings or convictions in your background, and there's this state commission that can go through things including your social media comments and decide whether you ought to be decertified. Saul, what's your take on this?
Well, I would respectfully disagree with this law. It seems to me that the will of the people should be honored. I agree with eligibility requirements. I think that makes sense. We have it for driving a car. We have it for all kinds of things, including voting for president. So I've got no problem with that. But I think
No problem with the state imposing the eligibility requirements?
No problem.
Okay.
But I do have a problem with if someone's elected, that they look at your social media and decide, well, we don't like you anymore and we're going to remove you. I don't agree with that.
Well, one of the sponsors of this said, we're not going to remove somebody for being unpopular. We have standards. So I'm going to run through. It's a big old long
Says
list.
who?
I'll hit some of the highlights. As I said, you can't have a criminal conviction, etc. But here's some of the language that this state commission could use to decertify you. If you've engaged in conduct including but not limited to verbal statements, writings, online posts, recordings, and gestures involving prejudice or discrimination against a person on the basis of race, religion, creed, color, national origin, immigration status, disability, genetic information, marital status, sex, gender identity, gender expression, age, sexual orientation, or military and veteran status. So that would be something that you could be decertified for. And I'll pause there because one of the things this Pierce County sheriff is infamous for, or depending on how you feel about it, is being against trans athletes, saying that a trans woman is not a woman. So he may fall under this verbal statements, writings, online posts involving prejudice or discrimination against blah, 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 gender identity, gender expression. Just one example. Reuven, what do you think of this law?
I know this sounds like inside baseball, but on some important level to me, it's important to recognize the moral authority of Senator John Lovick. He's the sponsor of this bill. He's the former sheriff of Snohomish County. He was a longtime career Washington State Patrol. He carries so much moral authority in the legislature. He's widely regarded on a personal, professional level. When I was in the Senate with him, I followed him on important votes. I just trust his judgment. He's from that community, that subculture. He really understands law enforcement. And as I heard him talk about this really is about giving the Criminal Justice Training Commission the authority and the directive. And dentists and doctors and other folks have professional standards. I don't think having sheriffs have standards, meet professional certification standards is a bad thing. Of course, there is, they are elected representatives by the people, so you have to be really cautious and judicious about that. But I really have a lot of trust in Senator Lovick and the care that he put in granting the authority to the commission to have a regulatory structure for this professional category, because they have the ability to take lives from people. So I have a lot of faith, and to me, that kind of thoughtfulness that he put into this crafting this law is a central driver of my comfort level with his approach.
Anyone else?
Well, I just say, Reuven, number one, what happens when he's not a state senator anymore? Number two, I would say a sheriff could say, look, I respect everyone, but I don't think boys should be playing girls' sports or something like that. And he could be removed from office. It's ridiculous.
Well, what about the cut that the audio I played you, where, and it's just another example of this Pierce County sheriff, I won't say what he seems to suggest. I'll leave it up to you. But he says, I'll quote him, "I don't recognize your authority to impose these controls over me." So there's a sort of a constitutional sheriff movement you may have heard of, that some law enforcement leaders think that they aren't subject to, they don't have to enforce laws that they don't like. This is happening in central Washington. So an elected official saying, I don't recognize the state's authority, number one. Number two, if you try to remove me, thousands of residents will surround the county city building and won't allow that to happen. Are those statements, are those disqualifying? Because even the state Association of Police and Sheriffs are talking about sanctioning him for saying such a thing.
Well, two things can be true at the same time. Number one, it's a kooky statement. It's a statement that's saying that I'm not going to follow the law. So that's ridiculous.
Kooky.
Yeah, it's nutty. It's a bad statement.
Yeah.
But the voters decide. I mean, Donald Trump has said way worse things than that. And we don't say, well, you can't be president. The voters decide. And so for this sheriff, the appropriate way to do it is to vote him out of office, not to say, well, you're saying things we don't like, so we're going to remove you.
What do you think, Reuven? Would you be okay with? So let's leave the social media post. The trans comments aside for a second. Would you be okay with an elected sheriff who's got to protect and serve for everybody, saying that he doesn't recognize the state's authority and try to come get me, and the people will swarm the city building?
I mean, no question. He crossed a line around civility and around the institution of public service. And at the same time, again, this is about a commission being very thoughtful and having the authority to look at the holistic nature of how someone performs. Yes, it's in reaction to this sheriff in many ways, but again, the policy on an ongoing basis is there a professional infrastructure around the certification of a sheriff who has really decisions over life and death. And I think there should be professional infrastructure around certification. I don't think that's a bad thing that we have in virtually every other professional sector. So outside of this individual, we're not.
Do we do that for other elected people? Saul's saying, well, if you're elected, then it's up to voters to remove.
Well, I think.
What about legislators?
Well, when you have life and death control over the public, I just think it's in a unique category. There ought to be professional safety net certification. It's less about the rhetoric, and it's more about the reality of how you might be handling your professional fiduciary obligations.
Shauna, anything to add or ask?
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder what this means for him in the future. My colleague,
the Pierce County Sheriff?
Yes. Yeah. My colleague wrote about it, that I think he has 15 complaints against him currently.
Something like that.
Yeah, with the Criminal Justice Training Commission. So I just wonder what that means for him in the future. She also noted that I think 46% of sheriffs in the state have complaints pending against them currently. And so what does that mean for?
Yeah, would this apply retroactively to these people who have complaints in their past?
Yeah.
Well, this Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank has also said if lawmakers pass a bill that would ban most officers from wearing face coverings, he would encourage his deputies to wear masks just to see what lawmakers would do in response. Saul, would you wait for the voters to, whenever the next election is, to make a judge on that, or would you say no? You don't. You can't tell your deputies to not enforce a law in fact, to contravene a law to get a response, that you cross the line, you are decertified.
No, I would let the voters decide.
Okay. All right. Since we're talking about the ICE question, that hangs over this. For example, there's a sheriff in Klickitat County who has, this is a red and blue state, right? So there's places where this may be a sanctuary state, so-called, where law enforcement's not supposed to enforce immigration, federal immigration enforcement, but there are sheriffs, for example, in Klickitat County, who have said, well, my voters who elected me want us to cooperate with ICE, and we're absolutely going to do that. And so I wonder what you think of let me pause there. Same thing, Saul?
No, let me back up. I want to make sure that it's clear that a sheriff or any person, there are ways, if he goes and murders someone, you can have him removed from office. You don't have to wait for the voters. But these comments don't qualify in that they're not in the same category as murdering someone or something like that.
Well, it wasn't just this is a law I like or don't like, but what about a sheriff saying we're not enforcing that law? It's a state law. I don't recognize. So he's basically saying the same thing. I don't recognize your authty.
Leave
him in office.
Leave it to the voters.
Okay. Let me segue then to Seattle, where there's a. By the way, do you disagree with that, Reuven? You leave him in office?
No, I mean, look, the arrest from ICE, 2,000. What's the number here in the Seattle Times on Wednesday? 2,340 folks. As you can imagine.
This is the number of arrests in Washington last
State
year,
by
almost
ICE.
half in King County, according to the UW Center for Human Rights.
Yeah, that's right. And
here's the director, Angelina Godoy, talking about this, saying, yeah, this is not Minneapolis scale, but people are being arrested here.
I hear a lot of conversation here in Washington about, we need to be ready if they do like what they're doing in Minnesota, if they bring it here. And in fact, I think this data shows they're already doing it here.
Yeah. So you were saying?
Yeah, I'm just saying this is a real impact on our state and, how law enforcement shows up. I mean, do we want law enforcement supporting them? No, we passed a law at the state level to not have them do that. And I just think we have to be really cautious about the role of local law enforcement. If the public doesn't feel like they can trust their local law enforcement, we have a real problem.
Well, let me ask you about something that's happening in Seattle, where Seattle is a so-called sanctuary city. As I said, local police are not to assist, share information with federal immigration where they don't have to. The police chief in Seattle, Sean Barnes, said that SPD officers are required to videotape ICE agents and verify their identity.
Officers will utilize their in-car and their body-worn camera video to ensure that we capture as much of this incident as possible. Officers will attempt to validate the status of individuals appearing to be law enforcement, and we've been very successful at this by respectfully requesting official identification when safe and feasible. If someone were not to provide that information, then we would use other means. We have lines of communication with some of our other federal partners that we can make calls, and or if their vehicle registration information, we can do that as well. I feel very confident that if someone is pretending to be a federal law enforcement agency, our officers will be able to determine that rather quickly.
Does that sound like good policy, Reuven?
I can understand it. I can appreciate. I mean, I think the professionals are really trying to navigate this. It sounds like they put a lot of thought into it. This is a complex situation, and it sounds like a fair and reasonable approach.
Anyone else?
I concur. What's the downside?
Well, there's some cop watchers say that this, including the head of the police union, the head of SPOG, when Mayor Wilson came out and talked about what she wants policy to be, the head of the union said that more of that, you're politicizing us, you're pitting us against federal law enforcement. It's unsafe. It's politicized, and it at least suggested that it's not going to happen.
I might feel differently if they weren't killing protesters, but given that that's happened, I think taping and videoing is a good idea. I think it's sound public policy.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I mean, I think there's this transparency issue. We're kind of dealing with unprecedented times at the federal level. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. You know, that could prevent, you know, some of these tragedies from happening, or, you know, if they know that there's more accountability there and they know that people are watching.
It's also a response to this. One of the things the state did was pass a ban on law enforcement wearing masks. And so I think part of this is a reaction to the idea that who knows who's an ICE agent just because they say they are, so that local police could have a role in protecting Seattle citizens by verifying the identity of federal agents. Okay, we got rare agreement on that one. We're going to take a break and talk about who's a journalist and why it matters in the halls of Olympia. We have someone who's walked those halls. We'll be right back.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Forest ecologist Suzanne Simard discusses her new book, When the Forest Breathes, Renewal and Resilience in the Natural World, in conversation with scientist and activist Jessica Hernandez, Monday, March 30th at 7 p.m. Tickets and more info at thirdplacebooks.com.
Every Friday on Seattle Now, we break down the week's news. State legislators had a 24-hour meeting to pass the millionaire's tax. The city is weighing adding some temporary public bathrooms ahead of the World Cup, and a local vegan cafe sparked outrage by adding chicken and eggs to the menu. Hear that and more on Seattle Now, wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke with Seattle Times state politics reporter Shauna Sowersby, former state legislator Reuven Carlyle, and Gamoran Legal Consulting's, what do you call the person? The namesake, Saul Gamoran. Or are they your namesake? However that works. They're all here discussing what happened this week. As I said, I'm Bill Radke. I host this show. Am I a journalist? Would you say I'm a journalist? I have journalists on the show. Sean is a journalist. I try to keep my political opinions to myself. Sometimes listeners think that they know what I think, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Am I a journalist? Why do I ask? You ask because some people who talk about politics professionally, whatever we're going to call them, they would like press passes to go to Olympia, to the state capitol, and report from close up on what our state government is doing, and presumably to fold what they see into the arguments that they make. Well, the legislature said, no, some of you're not really journalists, you're advocates. And this week, a federal judge agreed. 3 of these people are not journalists. These media figures vow to appeal this ruling. This case, may go to the state Supreme Court for all I know. So former state legislator Reuven Carlyle, will you first give us an idea what it means to have a press pass? These people who are called journalists and are allowed to come to where you used to work, what do they get to do?
They basically get pretty easy access to the chamber, the House and the Senate, to governor's offices, to the press conferences that exist. And not just that, but, you know, major events when candidates and campaigns are in full swing. They sort of get preferential direct access areas reserved for press. So it really is about access. And it also is sort of representative of the old style institutional structure of what was, you know, the traditional considered media, you know, the KUOWs, the Seattle Times, the newspapers and the broadcast journalists. Well, I mean, you know, sort of the institution of media where people who maybe went to journalism school or work for an organization that is widely regarded as a part of the institution of the traditional media.
Shauna, you have one of these press passes.
I do, yes.
How does it serve your public?
Is there free food?
I wish.
That you have this access. Why is that important?
Well, you know, especially when you're on deadline for something, being able to go into the wings of the chamber, you know, and being able to grab a lawmaker really quick, to grab a comment from them, to be able to sit at the press tables that are in front of each of the chambers. You know, you've got eyes on the lawmakers while they're passing bills. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely does give you a little bit extra access that you would not normally get if you didn't have one.
And that benefits your readers how?
Yeah, I mean, it just puts me in a position where I'm able to reach their lawmakers and press them on questions that, maybe I wouldn't have a chance to get a hold of them. A lot of them, well, I won't say a lot of them, but a few of them, won't answer emails or decline to, comment on things. So this kind of gives me the
But you get them while they're waiting for the elevator.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so these media figures, this is not irrelevant. All three that we're talking about, Ari Hoffman, Brandy Cruz, and Jonathan Cho, I don't like this right, left, it's one or the other, liberal, conservative, but they're right wingers in some sense. They're conservative media figures. Here's a little bit, this is one of them, Brandy Cruz, in fact, opposing the new income tax on her podcast called Undivided.
This is not rocket science. When you target people for taxation, people who are able to leave will leave. That's what's happening not just in Washington state, but across the West Coast. You are seeing a mass exodus of wealth to the East Coast, to states like Tennessee and Texas and Florida. You're seeing businesses pick up and move their entire infrastructure, which cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for some companies, because it's worth it to escape states like Washington. It's worth it to escape states like California and essentially start all over somewhere else.
Okay, so you could call that non-objective and partisan to the extent that the income tax passed along partisan lines. Here's one more clip of Brandy Cruz.
It's absolutely bewildering how anyone with a lick of common sense could believe that this trajectory our state is on is a good thing. And I mean, Bob Ferguson ran as a moderate. We knew he wasn't a moderate. Bob Ferguson blows with the wind. He's going to do whatever he thinks he needs to do to keep his job. And, maybe the citizens of Washington state will wake up.
Okay, so there's some of that partisan argument and ad hominem argument. The judge who said that Brandy Cruz is not a journalist, nor Hoffman or Cho, said that they participate in political activism. They also host at rallies. They speak at rallies. And this legislature, this House of Representatives that refuse to credential them, of course, are majority Democrat. So, Saul, I haven't heard from you yet. What do you think of this? What's the word? I guess gatekeeping. This decision that you're not a journalist, you're an advocate. You don't get the access that Shauna described.
Well, I'd respectfully disagree with the decision, certainly as it pertains to Brandy Cruz. If she were giving these type of editorials like she used to on Channel 13, under Reuven's analysis, it's really mainstream media is okay and non-mainstream media is not okay. It's not about being an advocate or not an advocate. And what I'm saying is, what if you're an editorial writer for the Seattle Times? You're clearly an advocate for your views. Are you to be denied press passes? An obvious solution would be to reserve half a dozen passes for advocating journalists or, journalists that are non-traditional, but they're journalists, as opposed to trying to split the atom by saying, well, Brandy Cruz is no longer a journalist because she leads rallies or she has strong opinions.
What do you think, Reuven?
Well, I think, again, it comes back, for me, back to the institution of an independent media. And, Brandy, I've been on her show. She's been good to me. And in a sense, it's not really about the positions she takes. It's, her funding is unclear, right? It's not public where she's funded by. It isn't.
Neither is the Seattle Times.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think the Seattle Times has a general statement. Again, and traditional institutions and affiliation with traditional institutions, it's not a defense. It's not an opposition to today's advocacy journalism. I mean, that's part legitimate. I mean, it's fine. The question, I think, is should there be press passes for advocates, and what's the difference between a business lobbyist or a labor lobbyist or an advocate wanting access to a press pass if they have a blog? Like, where does it end? I mean, it's art, not science. I accept that completely, and I just think that there are organizations that their entire essence of their business is as what we consider to be providing independent news coverage as a general statement. I think that ought to be the criteria. That's just my opinion, but I can understand the changing environment of today's advocacy journalism.
Well, this judge decided that that standard is too vague. Well, I'm sorry, that it's not too vague. The plaintiffs were saying, what's widely regarded, what's traditional, what's balanced, it's too vague. You can't exclude it. So the judge said, you're an advocate. It's clear enough to me. And the plaintiffs are saying they're going to keep appealing this case. Anything to add? Do you want to? Did we cover it?
No, the judge was wrong, and he's still wrong.
Are you advocating there? Yeah.
Well, since when does advocating make you not a journalist?
Here's a question. What's the downside of having? What are you worried, Reuven, about that this advocate is going to do in the legislature? So they're an advocate, so they're not objective. What does it matter if they have the access Shauna described? They can be right there and talk to the legislator.
I'm not losing sleep about it. I just think ultimately that they're lobbyists. They're lobbying for a point of view, and they ought to register as lobbyists and disclose where they get paid or something like that. Maybe that's the answer. Like, it's just that it's the press is, access to the press pass, which gives you preferential access to these organizations, to the institution of government. I just think there ought to be some general criteria. But I understand the criticism and the lack of clarity of that.
Yeah, it's
but
a tough call.
It's a tough call.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, we're about to end the show. Before I ask you what made you smile, something I haven't mentioned that the legislature did was to prevent companies from implanting a microchip in you, or even asking you, would you like to be microchipped? So that's not that. I didn't realize what a thing this is. There are countries where this story, I think it was the Seattle Times, I'm not sure about that. They mentioned Sweden, but it's a big, people will put radio frequency identification devices so they can swipe, they can pay for stuff, it's their identification to get in their building or what have you, but not in Washington State, pal. Washington Gas, $4.74. Seattle Metro, $4.91. Should the state give us a gas tax holiday while the undeclared war on Iran is on?
We should just get free gas.
Free gas. Yeah. Okay. We're advocating there for free gas. Okay. We're just about to end with the show. So did anything make you smile this week?
Well, I went to a new restaurant I had not been to before in Bellevue called Japonesa.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of a Japanese with a Latin twist, and it was fantastic.
Fusion.
Yes.
They fused, and that made you smile.
Yes, it did.
Excellent. Anyone else?
I'm just really happy the legislature ended last night.
But you love your job. You miss it.
I do. I'm going to miss it here in a couple weeks, but I need some sleep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for covering it for your readers.
So last week, at the end of the week, last week, I came into my house and my wife, Wendy, and she had 8 friends. They had 2 tables of mahjong going. And to hear the chaos and the noise and the laughter and the joy in a moment where the world is imploding, to just have a moment where a bunch of women friends were just filled with joy, playing games together and laughing. It just brought a lot of joy. And we've got 4 kids, a big household, and kids are off in college and everything. So it just it filled things up a bit in a moment where I think we all need to find joy again.
Yeah, that's comfort. I'm starting to put a band together to sing goopy, corny, feel-good songs just along those lines.
Awesome.
Right?
I love that.
That's what I want to hear. My smile is that, I'm always complaining that pro sports are not local enough, that they expect us to root for whatever out-of-town athletes have their, my city's name on the shirt, even though they got nothing else to do with my town except live in a high-end apartment in Sammamish for a couple of years. But at least they throw us a bone with the local restaurants at the stadium. So thumbs up to the newest T-Mobile Park souvenir food carrier. To mark the 75th anniversary of our state ferry system, you can get your food this season in a miniature Washington State ferry. The fish and chips sit on an open passenger deck with the cocktail sauce at the bow and the tartar sauce at the stern. It costs an extra $8 because, there's not enough money sloshing around in pro sports. But if you care, you'll pay. Opening day, March 26th.
Does it float?
As a matter of fact, I read about this in Axios, and they had that exact discussion. It actually is seaworthy, at least bathtub worthy. Yeah, it floats after you're done. Okay, let's get out of here. This is a Week in Review. We've been talking with the founder of Earth Finance, former state house member, state senator Reuven Carlyle, the founder and president of Gamoran Legal Consulting, Saul Gamoran, and the state politics reporter at the Seattle Times, the sleepy and about to rest up Shauna Sowersby. And this show's been produced by Kevin Kniestet, Kathy Faulkner on the radio board here, Juan Pablo Chiquiza, and Hans Twite. I'm Bill Radke, and I look forward to talking to you in a week.
This is KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. It's 1 o'clock.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Paul Henley. Today, European leaders criticise an American decision to ease sanctions on Russian oil to try to rein in soaring prices in the Iran war. The Ukrainian president says the move will help fund Moscow's war against Ukraine.
This single act alone by the US could provide Russia with approximately $10 billion for the war. This certainly does not help peace.
We'll hear from Moscow and from a member of Ukraine's parliament. And we speak to a psychologist in Lebanon about the effects that Israel's war with Hezbollah is having on people's mental health. Plus, scientists in the UK pioneer